All right. So thank you for being in the contemplation, meditation, for a moment together. It's really lovely. So Joel brings here the most essential part of the whole journey, so to speak, the allowance, the receiving grace, coming into the experience of light and love, and say having that as your basis of your communication. So this is, say, this the training, you could say, or this is the, yeah, that what we open up for. That what determines you feeling that connection and feeling the confirmation that there was no such thing as separation. So that isn't, say, yeah, it's the main thing. And when I say that, it sounds like just a subtle occurrence that once it has happened, then everything is fine. But that's not the way that works. So it's like, no, this is a continuing opening up for it. It is because there's no such thing as a continuity in time. So it's like continuously, I need to stay right on the mark in order for that to happen. And that means, say, the same as the description Joel gave, like letting go of thoughts, letting go of, say, entertaining concepts, and on and on and on. All these things in which we allow ourselves to collapse our human self into the nothingness that it really is. Say, like, dislodging from the self that you identify with as your human identity. So now this determines, in fact, your role as a practitioner or your role as a teacher. And you say, like, well, what is a teacher and what's a practitioner? You know, so the practitioner part is, you could say, like, is actually the same as a teacher. Because what you do, in fact, what you allow and what you have realized in yourself is the possibility of the direct communication, the possibility of grace, of light, and receiving that for yourself. In that, extending it to whoever is with you. So that's like, in fact, you decide whether you're one or not. You decide whether you're a practitioner or not, because it is your choice to receive grace. So that is not given by someone else or something like, okay, now you're ready to go for being this or being that, being a teacher or whatever. It's like, no, are you allowing yourself, as you identify yourself as a human being, are you allowing that to dislodge from the idea that you have about yourself? In other words, are you willing to just stand with no defenses, with open hands, with no desires or wishes or ifs or buts, in order to receive what is given? And are you willing to extend it to your brother, to whoever is with you, whoever you meet, whoever you're in, say, suddenly in relationship with? Because we're talking here about relationship. We're talking here about the recognition of you, your brother, in relationship with your creator. Like, if you recognize that's all one and the same stuff, with, say, free from every kind of comparison or some comparison or analysis about the situation, or thinking that you're further in this than someone else, or who knows what your considerations can be. Now this is the this is bringing you right here down, seeing the likeness of your brother, recognizing the light in him, recognizing that he is a savior as much as you are. You have the same source. You share the same mind, like the one mind of God. That's what you share. So in your recognition of that with your brother, you immediately start to communicate. There's light, there's love, there's a gratitude that suddenly overfloods like an what you call these things again? uh, like this tsunami, and that's the word I was looking for, like a tsunami of grace flowing over you, just like that, out of nowhere, for no, like not under conscious control, like, okay, now we're going to experience grace. No, 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 it flows freely over you. So it's like there's no control part for you in that. The only thing that you needed to do for that was to step back, to have your hands open and say, like, God, here I am, your servant is listening, I'm willing to see my brother as myself because he is. And all the differences that I saw a moment ago, I let go of that. Any kind of comparison I make with him or competition I feel with him, I drop it right here. I don't need that. Or any idea that I can hold about that I'm better off than him in the comparison of myself. I see the futility of that. I see that that makes no sense anymore. I'm not going to use that against my brother. See, and then you come to the place where you actually are open to receive grace because your consciousness is open, like your mind is open to receive this, and there it is, and there it is. You know, it's like that's how easy that is, and you can complicate it, and you do make it complicated. You say like, well, I cannot do it, maybe tomorrow, maybe when I feel better about myself, or maybe when I don't have pain anymore, or maybe when I, on and on and on. So you make excuses for yourself not to experience this. Or maybe I didn't have enough training yet, or maybe I don't deserve it today, or maybe I don't deserve it because of this and that. Like all these considerations that you have as a human being, like whoosh, that is already not any part of it except in your own experience of yourself. You can hold that against yourself, in other words. It's like you hold that sword against your own throat, and that's not necessary. So you don't have to earn this. You will hear Joel say the same thing. It's like you don't have to earn this. You don't have to work at this or something. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. This is coming to you because it is your natural sense of being. It's literally your nature. So I love that. So it's a great subject, and I love to continue with that too, because we have say heard a lot. We listened a lot to Joel. We are say writing about it. We are reading about it. We are considering it, pondering it, making poems with it. We do all kinds of things with it. So it's in fact already like a setup to come into giving this away. And that doesn't need to be that you have to start your own online classes or anything. No, this happens to you everywhere that you go, because there's no form chosen to do this. So you meet this in every aspect of your day. You can extend yourself while, say, sitting in your chair, for instance, having a moment in which you allow the light to come down, or to bless the one that's with you in your room, or the one that takes care of you. Even you can bless the person. You can recognize he's one with you. That can be beautiful. Like I speak from my own experience in giving care to people. We had moments that were so beautiful, just in the recognition, like, here we are, this is it, and however this is going to look, it really does not matter. And suddenly when you agree together in that is the situation that you find yourself in, there's always communication, there's grace, so it is like these moments will come to you in a way that suits you perfectly, that is so well composed, so to speak, that fits so well. And the only thing is that you have to think about it, that that's an option, and not respond to it as you were accustomed as a human being, and keep perpetuating the idea of a limited self, of victimization, of pain and disease and disaster, confirming these ideas. Like, no, you take time to allow something else to occur, to recognize literally, like, I don't need to express this verbally necessarily, but I definitely am open to experience grace right now. And I love to share that with my brother, with whoever is with me. You know, so like the situations come to you, they're tailor-made for you. But the only thing you need then is your consciousness and presence, like not to just keep walking around as a human being thinking that that's enough or something. It's like, no, that's not you. It is a self that in fact has no existence at all. It doesn't exist. It has no real moments. So the reality that you experience is in the moments of communication with your brother, and that is tangible, as Joel says. It's tangible. You can feel that, like you're literally designed to feel that. And that's a different vibration than you're used to. And like it is, you recognize it definitely, but it's different because it will immediately give you a sense of fulfillment and of grace and of gratitude and of happiness and a joy that cannot be described, like a joy for no reason that cannot be described. It's very, very much like your own secret. You share it, but it's your own secret. Like, no, you wouldn't be able to express it. It's so different. You wouldn't be able to express it in limited means, but you can definitely express it as the being that you are, communicating with me, with you, with your brother, in every occurrence that you can come up with. You could say like that is the only real moment that you really have, the moments that you share grace together. So that's the purpose of these meetings too. It's the purpose to experience that. It's not just to listen to Joel or to read something or to hear some new ideas. No, that would be useless. That would be useless in the sense of we cannot keep doing that. It is okay as an introduction to your spiritual path, and to see like, oh wow, I never saw it like this. Sure, but then it continues on. And you're right there. It's like it continues on by you opening up and getting curious about the experiences that are possible. So yeah, that's wonderful. So we're going to listen to the second part of the talk of Joel, the activity of the Christ as teacher or practitioner. So the second part, I choose that just it really doesn't matter which part I choose, really. In this talk, Joel is talking very gently, very so he's very much at ease when he's speaking. That's something that really is quite apparent, and so I love to hear it with you. So I'm going to start it up,
and therefore actually compel ourselves never to seek, even from God, anything of this world. Actually practice every single day, resisting the temptation to turn to God for anything of material nature, of a human nature. This too will so open our consciousness that it will eventually make room for the entrance of the Christ. Oh, we could take any of our principles revealed in the infinite way and work with them and develop our consciousness. But when someone comes to us with a problem, let us not believe that reciting these statements is going to prove to be a healing power, because it isn't. It's only going to deceive us, give us a false faith, because the actual healing power or grace comes from the Spirit of God within our consciousness, and it comes through the ability to turn within with that listening ear until we receive some assurance that God is on the scene. You see, always in the infinite way, there have been these two phases of our work: the letter of truth and the spirit of truth. And we have worked with the letter of truth to develop our consciousness. But then, when we face the problems of the world, we do not rely on these statements of truth. We rely on the presence and power of God itself. And this is made manifest only through consciousness. In other words, in our meditation, where we have developed this listening ear, where we have developed this ability to realize I at the center of our being, we open out a way for that imprisoned splendor to escape. That Spirit of God, that Christ. And then the patient or the student says, I feel better or I'm healed. We are apt to say very often, well, you see, I had nothing to do with it, God did it. That isn't quite correct. If there had not been a Jesus, the Christ would not have found entrance into the Holy Lands. If there had not been a Gautama the Buddha, the Christ or Buddha or the light, enlightenment, would not have entered India. Always, God is manifest as individual being. Therefore, always an individual is the inlet and the outlet through which the presence of God is made manifest on earth. I've spoken many times of the chaplains in both wars who brought forth healings and miracles that have been written about. Whole books have been written about them. And if those particular chaplains had not been there, those particular works would not have been accomplished. It wasn't all chaplains, it was these specific ones. And in each case, there were chaplains who knew that the presence of power of God is made manifest through individual consciousness, the consciousness which I am. The sad thing about the word God is that we have the power to speak it, and we shouldn't have that power. If only we didn't have the power to speak the word God or to think the word God, and could just be still without that word, and let God speak its own name, its own identity. God would speak with power. He would utter his voice and the earth would melt. Every time you hold the word God in your mind, you have a graven image. You are indulging idolatry. Or any time you have a synonym for the word of God in your mind, you are indulging idolatry. You are believing in a God that doesn't exist. You have just taken a word made up of letters and try to make a God out of it. And no word can be God, whether it's spoken or thought. For only I am God, and I is not a word. I is an identity. I is not a word. I is an identity. And I is God. Not when it is spoken, and therefore, over and over and over again, you have it in the message of the infinite way. Do not ever say, I am God, because then you have no God. Be still and know. And then when the voice utters itself and says, know ye not, I am God, I in the midst of thee, when you hear it, the voice of God is speaking. The presence of God has announced itself. The power of God is on the scene. When you voice it, all you've done is create a lot of vibrations, air vibrations in your throat. That isn't God. It is for this reason infinite way teachers and practitioners must arrive at that place in consciousness where they can give up the use of words and thoughts in their treatments, in their prayers, in their meditations, in their communion, and listen. Listen. Until an announcement comes from within. Then they'll have every assurance that God is on the scene. God is the consciousness of man. But that consciousness is only in spiritual expression when man himself learns to be still. In other words, men's speech and men's thoughts blot out, act as barriers to the presence and power of God. In stillness, in quietness, in confidence, God is. And God is manifest, and God is here, and God is now. You will have this come up in your practice many, many times, that people will ask you about the Bible promises. They may have been reading these Bible promises for years, and none of them ever come true. We have it asked over and over again about the statement, I have never seen the righteous begging bread. And then they'll tell us how many good people and how many religious people and even how many ministers they've seen who didn't have enough bread. Or the Master's, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And then they tell us how many people have been forsaken. And all because they were not taught that God never made those promises to the human race. God never made such promises to human beings. I'm afraid if God ever had made them to human beings, he'd withdraw them. When he found us throwing bombs at each other, or refusing to sell our wheat to each other because we didn't like each other's political ideology. I'm afraid God would get kind of disgusted with us. But as a matter of fact, God never uttered any of those promises to man whose breath is in his nostril. Those promises are addressed to the children of God, to those who are living in the light. And that doesn't mean to good people, because good people are not living in the light, necessarily. Just their being good does not mean that they are living in the light. There is something that transcends human goodness. And that something is when the Spirit of God has touched an individual. And when it has, then it becomes literally true. Look out from the top of this mountain, and all the land that you can see, I give you. Then it's literally true that the Christ never leaves nor forsakes. But only then is it true, after that the Spirit of God has come upon you. This has never been taught before. Therefore, people have been in darkness, and they have had no means of attaining the light. And the sad part is that when a person receives the light, they forget that they are talking to those who are not in the light, and they are apt to voice those same things to them, and thereby grows this metaphysical cliche business, like you are spiritual and you are God's perfect child, and which is a lot of nonsense. In the beginning, the Revelator who said that may have been looking at a human being, but they were addressing their Christhood. In other words, they were unaware of the humanness, and they were completely aware of the Christliness. And when an illumined individual says to you, you are the child of God, they not only are addressing your Christhood, but they are lifting you up into it. And they are all right when they do it. But then the moment the human student goes out of the room and goes home and says to their family, oh, do you know you are children of God? And they are addressing human beings who perhaps 2 minutes before were pulling each other's hair out. It was all wrong. And so eventually we came to the days of the metaphysical cliche. Oh, you're the child of God. You're joint heir to all the heavenly riches. Well, at least lend me enough for a sandwich right now. You see, as a teacher and as a practitioner, if you make the statement, orally or in writing, to your patient or student, to the effect that you are spiritual, that you are the Christ, that you are joint heir, that you are perfect, be sure that you are speaking through your Christhood to their Christhood, that you are unaware of their humanhood, and that you are not referring to their humanhood. And then you will be speaking the truth and lifting up the Son of God in them, lifting up the Christ in them. Be sure that you're not addressing their humanhood and trying to spiritualize it, because you will fail. You cannot spiritualize humanhood. You can only die to it, destroy it, remove it. And you do this not by trying to die, not by trying to remove, but by recognizing Christhood. And you see, you cannot do this through your human mind, because here again you get back into the days of the cliche. The moment you, through the human mind, try to tell anyone they're spiritual, you're as foolish as they would be if they believed you. You can only make that statement through whatever measure of illumination has been given to you. Otherwise, well, then all the people who have these books would just go around saying you are spiritual and you are perfect and you are free. But you see, it doesn't happen that way. It's in the same way that, again, that's the subject of metaphysical cliches. Error isn't power. Oh, disease isn't power. Oh, there is no lack and limitation. And then what happens? Just nothing. Just nothing. Whereas, if that same statement is made by one of spiritual illumination, something does happen. Error is proved of none power. It definitely is. If the Master says, rise, pick up your bed and walk, it happens. If the next Hebrew rabbi says, oh, I think I'll try that, and he says, rise, pick up thy bed and walk, and then he looks at, nothing happened. Well, now that's strange. Here's one Hebrew rabbi can say it, and look what miracles happen, and here's another Hebrew rabbi says it, and nothing happens. Now, what is the difference? Well, you see, it wasn't the statement that had any power. It was the consciousness behind the statement that had the power. And if the consciousness wasn't behind the statement would have been of no effect. And so it is when you hear metaphysicians, as you often do, voicing their nonsensical, you are spiritual and error has no power and all the rest of these things, it must sadden you to see such self-deception, because they really believe it. But those statements aren't power. They aren't truth. The only thing that is truth is the consciousness from which such statements should emanate. That consciousness is the truth, not the words. Therefore, the teacher, the practitioner, should be very careful of the words they speak or write to the student or patient. They should weigh carefully whether they are just voicing or writing something they've read or something that has come to them from inner conviction. You see, healing work doesn't take a lot of statements of truth. It only takes one tiny little sentence, if behind it is the consciousness. And it is far better to limit our conversation and our letters to a statement of which we have received some measure of conviction. Probably the patient or student is expecting a nice long letter with a lot of wonderful truth in it. But it's far better to disappoint them and let them have one tiny sentence out of our inner conviction, because that will carry with it the power of healing. It is even better, if we can, to say nothing. And that is why I've instructed practitioners everywhere that it is far better when asked for help just to say, I will give it to you, and nothing further. And then go within and give it. than to rehearse long lessons in metaphysics, which can only prove in the end to be mental exercises, mental gymnastics. There is a time for teaching, yes. There is a time for revealing principles. But as a rule, that time isn't when people are very ill or in great pain or in great marital unhappiness or family unhappiness or national distress. That isn't the time to go around giving sermons. Usually that is the time to be still and just say, I will give you help. Relax, rest, leave this with me. And then go back into the silence and let the Spirit of God bear witness with your spirit. This is prayer. I know not how to pray, how to go out or how to come in, or what things to pray for. Therefore, let the Spirit of God bear witness with my spirit, and let this be the prayer. Let this be the treatment. If I am still enough, the Spirit of God will mingle with my spirit. The two will become one, and then out of that silence will come a healing. And that's far better than speech. Sometimes in voicing a lot of truths, we're merely feeding our own egos. We're letting the patient and student know how much we know. And really, we shouldn't care whether they believe we know a lot or don't know a lot. As a matter of fact, they don't really care. What they really care is, do we know enough to bring out the healing? And we don't have to convince them of that with speech. Let the healing be the proof of our consciousness. In teaching, we teach principles primarily, or we should. And if you will notice carefully, any of the monthly letters, pick up any you like, any tape you like, any book you like, you will discover that I have merely presented certain spiritual principles and elaborated on them, sometimes for a page and sometimes for a chapter. Pick up any of my lectures and you will see that all I have done is taken 1, 2, or 3 principles and elaborated on them for an hour. To me, that is the essence of teaching the infinite way. Merely taking 1, 2, or 3 principles and presenting them in a dozen different ways. Because sometimes you present it in one way and it isn't grasped, you present it in another way, it isn't grasped, and you present it the third way and that registers. Or one way registers with one and another one with another. But notice this, that actually in all of the infinite way literature there isn't any such thing as what you'd call a book. That's why the publishers wouldn't publish them at first. They really weren't books. The only reason they began to publish them was because there was a demand for them. And the publishers themselves don't understand why that demand exists, except one here in England who knows very well why. But the others don't know why, because they look at it and it isn't a book. Of course it isn't. There are no books. As you read them again, you'll notice there are just certain principles. and a principle is presented. It's explained how to practice it, how to think of it, how to utilize it. And then we go on to another principle and another principle, and that's all it is. By the time we're through, we call it a book. It isn't. It's just these same principles presented, and presented each time in different forms. And so should teachings be. We have no right to make speeches. We have no right to give sermons. We have no right to give rules how anybody should live. Our only right as teachers or practitioners in the infinite way is to present to those students who desire it certain specific principles which, if they take into their consciousness, live with and work with, will bring them into the preparedness to receive the grace of God. You see, the Spirit of God that comes upon us comes by grace. There's nothing in your life that you can do that will earn it for you or make you deserving of it. No one is ever deserving of grace, and no one ever can earn grace. Grace is a gift of God. The only thing we can do is prepare ourselves for it. And as we abide in these principles and work with them, we prepare our consciousness to receive that grace. Because we prepare our consciousness to become a state of silence. And it is only in that silence that the grace descends upon us. Absent from the body and present with the Lord. Absent from the world. Absent from things. Absent from thoughts. And then in that inner silence, the Spirit of God comes upon us. Then understand this. The grace of God is a tangible thing. Just as the Spirit of God or the Christ is a tangible thing. Not tangible in the sense of touching, tasting, smelling, seeing, hearing, but tangible in that the Word always is made flesh. Therefore, to experience this grace, there must be an absence of self. And that really explains the spiritual life. There must be an absence of self. The moment I am not thinking thoughts, the moment I am not entertaining concepts, the moment I am having no desires, in that moment I am absent from the body.